here we are on level 4 at St. Mary's in Grafton. We're examining the buttress on the northwest corner, northwest corner of the tower. Just come on over and have a really close look at what's happening here. And you can see that the mortar that was put on, I can't get that piece come off, but a piece is fractured right off. The damage is being done by all the moisture inside. And I'm going to let Terry talk about the one around the corner because he's standing right in front of it. Yeah. Give us your thoughts, Terry.
Well, I know that from our investigations back in November, this parging has been placed over top of brick that is installed on an angle to create a water shedding plane. Problem is these areas of buildings on churches need to be maintained because the mortar will get lost first. If the mortar washes out of the joint and you don't repair it, then that's a way for water to get in. I think what happened, I don't know exactly when, they got tired of that, so to hide all the damage, they've simply put a parge coat of the cementitious topping over top, but like I can tell, I hear hollows.
I agree.
And that's what Tom said. What this has done, it's not even water protection, it absorbs water, but with the cracking, it's allowing water in. And what's happening here is the brick has absorbed that water, it can't dry out. And in the winter, if it's still damp, the freeze thaw have caused it to pop off. I mean, I can see a couple of other bricks in the vicinity that are suffering the same.
Something I want to kind of describe to everybody watching us, Shannon, is because they might not think about this, but if you could imagine taking this section of brick and you brought that section of brick down and you just basically tilted it away to meet that buttress. That's what you would see under what Terry's referring to as fictitious. Say the word for me again, Terry. I always say it wrong.
Cementitious
cementitious material. Because can you see the brick here, Shannon? I don't know. So there are folks at home. So that's what they've done, is that brick basically carries down here and creates this slope, this shedding effect for the buttress. But on top of this, as Terry's talking about, that's where they've placed this material over top of it, because these joints have gotten open here. And in a lot of cases, it's from water falling up higher, landing on them, continuously washing those joints out, and then...
Well, on other churches, what you'll find is this is generally where they would introduce a sloping wash course of stone to eliminate the number of mortar joints. But, you know, when this church was being built, it's a rural community. They didn't have access to a quarry, so stones were used in very special areas. So they did build the sloping portion of the buttress with masonry, but it's a maintenance concern for the history of the building. Doing this is the wrong approach. What this does is it puts an envelope over top of the brick and it can't breathe now. And water's going to get in because it'll find its way through the matrix of mortar joints on the wall. And this will just absorb water, which it's doing, and you can see the dampness trying to come out.
Trying to come out of it, actually, even. I want to just comment about this patching up here. This is something Jim and I run into all the time, Shannon. We see this, basically, Portland cement being used to patch areas on these very, very soft clay bricks, okay, after they've opened up. And going back to what Terry's saying again, all of a sudden, this stuff does not help us at all. It's very, very hard. It does not allow the wicking effect to happen, that the water can transfer back and forth through it. It's just a terrible thing when we see it. And it's usually a mess like this. As you can well see, this is just a mess. The fellow that did that, he might better have had a caulking gun with him and caulked the top of this, so you had something that was flexible and that would allow things to move a bit rather than done this. Obviously, this is what was in a skyjack, and that's what he used, right?
Yeah.
Just come around to this side with the camera, Shannon, so that everybody can see how bad that buttress actually is.
Like, we had rain last night.
We did.
You had a heavy rain, so I can see the moisture, you know, like it's damp. So what's happening is the brick is trying to dry out, and it can't. So what will eventually happen is the brick will just fail. The best example is just below the scaffold. You see the face of the brick is spalled off. It was wet, it got frozen, and the freeze thaw effect just blew the surface of the brick right off. I don't want to start hitting this, Tom, with a hammer to see what's in behind, because we may not have the resources to repair this right now. But this, in the original scope of work for the entire conservation, was one of the areas that needed to be addressed, meaning pull all of this off and then repair the brickwork. You know, and that would probably involve replacement brick, because I fear too many of these are gone. There's other locations where you can find the buttress as it was originally done. They didn't put this cementitious coat over top, and that's where you can see the way the mason laid the horizontal, the sloping brick.
Right.
It can
and
work.
if it's maintained, it does last. But if it's not maintained, yes.
And the maintenance really is just making sure your mortar joints, like you see, a little opening like that in 10 years, if it goes unrepaired, can lead to like a whole area of a wall becoming compromised. So, anyway.
We see it a lot, don't we, Jim?
There's a lot of this.
Too much.
Yeah,
So before we walk away from this area, just go over to this window beside us, Shannon, and Terry's going to go over and talk about what's going on over there.
Well, first of all, we would never paint stone. This is actually a detailed piece of stone. You can see the tooling marks. That's what we call combing. I don't know why it was painted. If we had the funds, I'd like to remove this paint, Tom. So we talked about this last week. But what's happening here is, unfortunately, the inside of the spire, the tower, has been moist for a long time. And one of the prime candidates to fail in a masonry wall is when you have wood laying in the wood wall. The sills and up the jambs are highly susceptible to rot, and that's what's going on here right now. But I think this really happened in an accelerated manner because we know how wet the inside's been all the time. So this poor sill has never had a chance to thoroughly dry out.
Yes, and even now you can feel the dampness in it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And the dampness is both from like atmospheric weather, but also water vapor staying inside the tower and not being able to get out. That happened because they sealed the louvers.
Yes.
Like there's no natural ventilation happening in this tower. So now what's going to happen is this sill has to be removed and replaced, and I would suspect that part of the wood jamb would have to be cut out because water through capillary action will travel up into the different members that make up the wood window. So even though this is gone, like parts of this may be gone, and then we'll find good wood and we'll put in a wood Dutchman. That's how I do it.
I'd like to get Jim involved in this conversation. What do you think we should be doing about ventilating on this particular window too, Jim, while we're making these repairs from all of our
the stained glass, if you don't vent the stained glass, it just rots over time. The sun just makes it so hot, it just deteriorates, and you'll have to just have to redo it.
Yeah. Terry's been doing a lot of it in Toronto.
Yeah, so what they do, they call this protective glazing. It's a second layer of glass that's been put over a heritage leaded cane window, which you can see the lead canes form a diamond pattern. And we get our colored glass. The original window was both like a piece of art to be looked at, but also was a weather barrier. But because they are susceptible to failure, the leads originally used in North American windows by the first builders was a very high content lead, so it was very susceptible to softening in the heat. Modern leads are alloys that have mixtures that make them a little stiffer, but still easy enough to work with. But the problem is, and this is where Tom's going, you put a protective piece of glass in front to save the artwork. There's a gap of space between the two layers of glass. We call that the interstitial space. And on a hot day, that will heat up to a point that it's so hot that it actually starts the lead cames on the window to fail prematurely. So you either put vents in this or you protect your windows with something other than glass. We've been experimenting with brass and bronze screens. But, you know, depending on the state of the window, how decorative it is, they cast shadows. So those are the dilemmas. But at a minimum, there should be a couple of vent holes in here and a vent at the top. And it looks like it's broken at the top to allow the air to flow out like a stack effect. So.
Gotcha. Jim and I, Shannon, 2 years ago now, Jim, we had the opportunity to participate in Jane's Walk in Belleville. But before we did that, we went to the Baptist church in Belleville and had quite a learning experience for both of us even. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon in the month of May, and the sun was immediately out of the west, right on these windows. And none of us in the group, and I think there was a group of 6 of us there, could hold our hand on the stained glass window on the inside for more than 10 seconds.
That's how hot it was.
The window was so hot because they had done exactly what had happened here.
Yeah.
You would have thought the lead was just going to melt because it was just unbelievable. We just could not. 10 seconds, you wanted to get your hand off your stained glass window on the inside from the heat.
Yeah.
So it showed us a lot from that particular example. Yeah.
I mean, this window, I mean, maybe it's all of 12 inches in width. On larger glass windows, the problem is with that kind of intense heat building up on these windows, they tend to deform.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And once that happens, you're potentially at risk of losing the artwork. Right? So. But this is not in our scope today, so I'm going to keep going up.
After you